Last week we finished 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Tonight I'm going to give you an overview of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, which we'll jump into next Wednesday night. And I'm a big believer in studying anything, of taking regular bird's eye views of whatever you're studying. You can, whatever you're studying, you need to dive down into the details of, okay, take history, that's my thing. You need to dive down into the details of revolutionary. If I had a free life, right, where I weren't living for eternity, that's a stupid if, but I'm just saying, if I had a free life where I would think there's nothing I would like to do better than to become an American Revolutionary War expert. I'm not even a kindergartner in the history of the Revolutionary War, but I would love to become an expert in the Revolutionary War. So if I was going to tackle that, I would want to get down in the details of what was going on in every colony, in every town, every village, the life of every founder. But every once in a while, every founding father, every once in a while, I would need to zoom out and visit the whole picture again. If you're going to master anything, you got to get down, hands-on, and get in there with the nitty-gritty details. But every once in a while, if you work on projects, you know this. Every once in a while, you just got to step back and look at the big picture and see how you're coming and remind yourself of where you're headed. So that's what we're going to do tonight before we jump into chapter 3. We're going to review what we've seen already, and then we're going to take an overview of chapter 3, which we will begin verse by verse next week. The theme of 1 Corinthians is correcting problems in the church. The key verse is chapter 3 and verse 3. So the theme is correcting problems in the church. The key verse of 1 Corinthians is 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse number 3, which reads, knowing this first, I'm in 2 Peter. How in the world I get to 2 Peter? 1 Corinthians 3:3. For ye are yet carnal. My Mickey Mouse voice. Carnal, boys and girls. For ye are yet carnal. For whereas there is among you envying and strife and divisions, are ye not yet carnal and walk as men? Now, that's what I pinpoint as the key verse of the book. That's the spiritual reason why Paul has to solve these problems in the church. Because the people in the church are carnal. Now, chapter 3 is all about the carnality, so I'll come back to that in a minute. But let's continue. The simple outline of the book of 1 Corinthians. I believe if you're going to learn any book of the Bible, if at all possible, put your finger on a simple outline of the book. What we have when we finish studying a book is a very detailed outline. Okay, my detailed outline for Romans, which we finished last year, was pages and pages and pages and subpoints and subpoints under subpoints. That's a complicated outline, a detailed outline. But what you need to start out on any book, if possible, is a simple outline. Why do I say if possible? Because some books are so short that the only outline there is for that book is the basic outline of those 21 verses or whatever. But most books lend themselves to a simple outline. All right, the examples I almost always give, Daniel has 12 chapters. First part of Daniel, chapters 1 through 6, stories of Daniel in Babylon. And chapters 6 through 12, prophecies of Daniel in Babylon. That is a simple outline of the book. It helps you know where to begin. It helps you know how to approach it. Ephesians has 6 chapters. Ephesians, and the theme of the book, by my estimation, is the Christian walk. And top of my head, I'm forgetting it. Chapters 1 through 3, the basis, B-A-S-I-S, the basis, the doctrinal basis of the Christian walk. And then chapters 4 through 6, the basics, B-A-S-I-C-S, of the Christian walk. That's a simple outline of the book of Romans. So, the simple outline of the book of 1 Corinthians. Here it is. 1 Corinthians 1 through 4, preparing for correction. And that's where we've been for these 21 weeks, and we'll be there for a while more. And let this be a good lesson to us that if we're going to correct someone that we love, you got to lay a proper groundwork. All right. If your job is judgment, punishment, then you don't care what the relationship is like afterwards, right? That's just judgment. And that's why it's important to know, as we said Sunday morning, we don't face God's judgment. Jesus faced God's judgment for us. That is done. So he does not deal with us now as our judge. He deals with us now as our Father. So all the correction that he does as a father so that we will survive the correction, so that we will come out on the other side stronger, better. Okay? So, if you're going to correct somebody and your goal is for them to be improved, for them to be stronger, you got to lay a groundwork. And chapters 1 through 4 are the groundwork, preparing for correction. Chapters 5 through 15 are the details of correction. There are so many matters pertaining to believers that are introduced to us in 1 Corinthians 5 through 15. Matters regarding marriage. Matters regarding going to court with fellow believers. Matters regarding questionable issues and practices. Doctrinal matters. Matters regarding the Lord's Supper. All kinds of things. And these are things where the church in Corinth was failing. And Paul had to correct these things. And thank God, it doesn't mean that they had to sin in order for us to learn. But God took their sin as an opportunity to give us a handbook of how to fix things that are broken in the church and how to make sure they don't get broken. So chapters 5 through 15, details of correction. And then chapter 16, surviving correction. When we get there, in whatever that is, 2026 or whatever that turns out to be, when we get there, we will find out that the tone of chapter 16 implies you're going to be okay. Sometimes have you ever been in a position where maybe at work or in school or in some situation of life, you had to be corrected? And as you're being corrected, you're thinking, am I fired? Am I kicked off the team? Am I done? And you don't know how it's going to end. And then by the end of the conversation, the person who is correcting you starts saying things like, so from now on, and you're going, oh, thank God, there's a from now on here. And chapter 16 is sort of a from now on chapter. Surviving correction. All right, let's talk about the chapters that we've looked at so far now. 1 Corinthians 1, the foolishness of preaching. Now, this, don't forget, now going back to laying the groundwork to correct us. And Paul reminds the people first that God has chosen to use the foolishness of preaching as his method to build us. Chapter 2, 1 Corinthians 2, that's where we've been for a number of weeks now. The source of truth. The source of truth. And that's where we discussed revelation, inspiration, and illumination, because they're all right there in chapter 2. The source of truth. Now, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, which will begin next week, the carnality of glory. Oops, that's a misprint. I'm sorry. That should say glorifying. No, glorying in. Glorying in. I had it right. By cracky. The carnality of glorying in men. The carnality of glorying in men. And the key verse is chapter 3, verse number 21. Now, let me stop and answer a question that you may be asking. How is it possible that the key verse of the whole book is chapter 3, verse 3? Wouldn't that also mean that when we get to chapter 3, the key verse would have to be verse 3? No. The purpose of a key verse is to state succinctly the message of the whole book or the whole chapter. So what you're looking for, if in noting a key verse, what you're looking for is the verse that best summarizes the whole book. Or in a chapter, the verse that best summarizes the whole chapter. So, the verse that best summarizes the whole book is different than the verse that best summarizes chapter 3. The verse that best summarizes what's going on in this book is chapter 3, verse 3. Ye are yet carnal, for whereas there is among you envying and strife and divisions, are ye not yet carnal and walk as men? But since the subject matter or the title of chapter 3 is the carnality of glorying in men, there's a verse that best summarizes that idea, and that's verse 21. Therefore, let no man glory in men, for all things are yours. So, that is the key verse of chapter number 3. All righty, now we're going to break down this chapter, and then we'll be through for tonight. I may say a word about things as we go. Next week, we're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. Let's read it since we're in the neighborhood here. And I, brethren, could not speak unto you as unto spiritual, but as unto carnal, even as unto babes in Christ. All right, so as we dig into this next week, we're going to see, and every Bible teacher that I've ever read holds this position, that there is the spiritual man, which is the saved person walking in the Spirit, and there is the natural man, which we talked about for a couple of weeks at the end of chapter 2. The natural man is the lost man. He does not have the Spirit of God living in him. But there's a third group, which he introduces in chapter 3, and that is the carnal Christian. He said, I could not speak unto you as unto spiritual. I couldn't speak unto you as I would speak unto a spirit-filled Christian. I've got to speak unto you as unto babes in Christ. Now he says, as unto carnal. What does that mean? Well, the word carnal means fleshly. Our favorite restaurant down the road here, Minas Carne. I assume that's Spanish or Brazilian or something for meat. When you talk about looking on seeing a crime scene and there was a lot of carnage, what does it mean? It means horrible, flesh and blood. And the word carnal means fleshly. He said, I couldn't speak unto you as unto spiritual. I had to speak unto you as unto carnal, as unto babes in Christ. He doesn't say I had to speak unto you as unto lost people. but as do carnal, fleshly people. So a carnal Christian is a believer who is not walking in the Spirit. So we have lost people, the natural man. Let me go this direction, your left to right. The natural man, which is lost people. The carnal Christian, which is saved people who are not walking in the Spirit. And then we have the spiritual man, which is the Spirit-filled man. So, verse 2, I have fed you with milk and not with meat. For hitherto ye were not able to bear it, neither yet now are ye able, for ye are yet carnal. For whereas there is among you envying and strife and divisions, are ye not carnal, and walk as men? For one saith, I am of Paul, and another, I am of Apollos. Are ye not carnal? He keeps pounding that word in the ground, carnal, fleshly. Save people who walk in the flesh. You know what will tear a church apart? Any church faster than anything else? Save people walking in the flesh. They are destroying the work of God in individual people's lives, and they don't even realize it. And that's what that's what happened in the church of Corinth. Carnal Christians tearing the church apart. Ye are yet carnal. Verses 5 through 11, we are laborers together with God. Verses 12 through 15, every man's work shall be made manifest. And what we're giving is titles to these sections to summarize them. Every man's work shall be made manifest. Then verses 16 and 17, ye are the temple of God. And finally, verses 18 through 23, let no man glory in man. So that's how chapter 3 breaks down. We will jump into verses 1 through 4 next Wednesday night. I'm trying to go at a pace that is slow enough that we can digest everything, but fast enough that we do not lose sight of the whole picture of the book of 1 Corinthians. And I hope, as with every other book we've studied, I think, in this format, I think this is the 7th epistle that we have studied in this specific format. And I hope that you have a general idea of some of the others just in your mind, just because of the way we did it. I hope you do. James, 1 Peter, Ephesians, Philippians, Romans, 1 Corinthians. There's one more. Oh, I said 1 Peter. Whatever they are. I think I counted 7 of them the other day. Very good. Let's stand together.